Okay, I guess we'll get started here. It's about time, and I know everybody's time is valuable here at World Dairy Expo. So I'd like to welcome you today to the Dairy Forage Seminar. I appreciate the invitation, and hopefully I can do the invitation justice. So one thing I really enjoy producing forages, and by that I enjoy it year-round. So I feed most of my hay that I raise, not all, but most. And I enjoy the challenge through the growing season, but I also, the months of December, January, February, when there's snow on the ground, if I have nice feed to feed my heifers, I get a satisfaction out of that. So at the moment, I'd like to introduce my family. My wife is in the back. You can raise your hand, please, Nancy. And our youngest daughter, Krista. Krista and her husband, Matthew, live at Germantown, Wisconsin. She's a full-time director for Mary Kay Cosmetics. And our oldest daughter, Laura, teaches ag education at South Dakota State University in Brookings, South Dakota. So, and also my brother, Dwight, happened to drop by today, too. So thanks for coming. So we're from Osceola, Wisconsin. That's Polk County, Wisconsin. It's northwest Wisconsin. It's about an hour and 10 minutes north of St. Paul, Minnesota. So we're real close to the St. Croix River. On a good clear day, I'm able to see the Minnesota River bluffs from our farm. So we raise corn, soybeans, mostly hay, and most of our hay goes to dairy heifers. Some does get sold. So just to be clear, so we're all on the same page. I'll get to it in a little bit, but the goal for the farm is to raise as much 150, 160 RFQ hay that we can, and we try to raise lots of it per acre. Okay, and probably 4 or 5 years ago, prior to that, I only dry baled my hay, but 4 or 5 years ago, I went to Baleage, and that has just been an absolute godsend this year. So we've had a lot of rain. So I'll just recap our growing season. You know, in 2 words, it's very wet. Started wet, it was late. I probably didn't get my new seeding in until maybe April 15th or so. Corn was after that, and my soybeans were the first few days of June. And I don't think we went more than 6 days without rain. So in our area, 40% chance of rain would equal ½ inch. So in other years when it's dry, you know, you wouldn't get anything. So, you know, up at home, there's a lot of long faces right now. So this past Sunday, we got between 2 and 5 inches of rain. And there's just a lot of corn silage that yet to be chopped. So both due to the winter kill and people try to make more of a cushion for their forage, and I'd say there's maybe only about a third of the corn silage that's chopped that needs to get. So it's just going to be a long, hard fall. So, but hopefully, we all know weather can change. So hopefully, it stops raining soon. So, you want to go to the next photo? Okay. So, like I say, we're a family farm. It's been in Nancy's family a long time, I think maybe about 134, 135 years this year. So I'm fortunate that alfalfa loves my farm. So I have Rochout silt loam soil, and my topography, it's well drained. So that helps a lot in growing the alfalfa. So we have some contour strips that my father-in-law put in the 1950s. And when Nancy and I came there a few years ago, or I should say in the late 80s, we put in a few more contour strips. So one thing, we always have to guard, or I'm always on guard for erosion, just because soil type and topography. And my farm is like many other farms in the neighborhood. We're in Wisconsin in the Horse Creek watershed. So part of the runoff that leaves my farm can end up in the Gulf of Mexico. So we're always try to do a good job with water quality. I try to keep hay on my erodible acres and do the reduced tillage. So if you would click 2 slides, please. One more. Okay, so this is not pure alfalfa, but I'm going to call it alfalfa. Okay, so just so that's a mixed stand, but it's handled as alfalfa. Do you want to go one more? Okay, this is, I'm going to call this a grass. There is some alfalfa in here. This is 4th crop, but I manage this as grass. So when I say alfalfa, it's usually it's going to be mixed, and when I say grass, it's mostly grass. So the most important number for my farm for forage is that 150 to 160 RFQ. So that is a more important number for me in my program than it is if it's 70% alfalfa, 30% grass, or 30% alfalfa, 70% grass. So I can make both types of hay work for me very well. So give you a little history. Back in the mid-2000s, we sold our dairy herd, and I wanted to keep my heifers and raise some hay on my erodible ground. So I talked to my nutritionist, and I asked them, I told them kind of what I wanted to do. I wanted to do just very simple, hay and grain mix. I didn't want to monkey with the silos or do the chopping or anything like that. And he encouraged me that I could do a very good job doing that. But there's a couple things. He said he told me I should put some grass in with my alfalfa to lower the protein. So he wants it below 20% if I can. And then he said the forage quality depended upon what we would put in the grain mix, meaning if it was lower protein, we could up the protein in the grain mix and so forth. So that's what I did. So orchard grass was my first choice. So some people don't like it, but it works very well for me. It does have a definite couple drawbacks, but I can easily live with those. So the first year that we seeded down, I didn't think it was too tough because it was just going to be heifer hay. So I just seeded it with oats, kept it for grain, seeded the alfalfa, and orchard grass. Well, the stand that I got, I didn't really like. So, when we took the first test after the first crop, because I was used to all pure alfalfa. So once I got the first forage test back, then I was really disappointed. So I knew we had a lot of work to do. So I think one of the first things I did, I bought my own bale probe. So, because every time we bale, I started taking forage tests just so we get a read. It's kind of a report card on how you're doing that way. So the issue for me is how do I get my grass in the alfalfa, okay, and done right. So I tried several different ways for a few years, and I really wasn't happy with any of them. So what I've done now, and I learned by accident, is that what I do now, could you go back 2 slides? There we go. Okay, this is how I like to seed my orchard grass in the alfalfa. So I start out with Roundup Ready alfalfa on my erodible acres, and now the last couple of years I've added the Harv Extra low lignin alfalfa. So those fields are going to stay in hay 6, 7, 8 years. You know, I figure Harv Extra in my book, it pays back every time you cut, either in quality or yield. So when it's going to be in forage that long, you know, I'm gladly will pay for the technology fee. So if you could go 2, yeah, forward please. One more please. One more. I'm sorry. One more. I'm sorry. Okay. So this cornfield on the left, this helped me decide. Okay. So, and what I mean by that is a few years after we sold our cows, that's that chunk of cornfield right there is at the bottom of the hill where all the contour strips were. That, for my farm, that is one gorgeous piece of dirt. Okay, I wish my whole farm was that. But anyway, what I'm getting at is after we sold our cows, that was our last field of hay to get plowed up. So the guys that custom combined for me, they had done over 1,500 acres when they got to my place. When they got to that spot right there, they got the highest yield bump on the yield monitor in over 1,500 acres. Okay, so I was very proud. That said, when I added up all my scale tickets, that was definitely not my highest yielding corn year. Okay, I was disappointed. So what it proved to me is if you're after big farm yields, okay, you have to do everything you can to get all your acres and all parts of the field to the best that you can. So I took that same philosophy and I used it with Roundup Ready alfalfa. So Roundup Ready alfalfa, I feel that year after year gives me the most consistent stand. I feel that new seeding alfalfa is a poor competitor. It doesn't compete well with the nurse crop. It doesn't compete well with weeds. It doesn't compete for the nurse crop that's taller. It doesn't compete well for moisture. So if you can take some of that stress, some of the variability out of those issues, okay, it's, in my opinion, you start out with a better field of hay going forward. And then what we do is either the fall of that year or the following spring, I take my grain drill, put some orchard grass, and I go over all my hay fields, or that clear seeded. So, and that has worked out very well. So I will caution you, you have to be very patient because say by July 4th, you're going to think it was just a total waste of money because you can hardly find any orchard grass. But it's not too long. By the fourth crop, you can see some. You can't really see it in the hay. But by the next year, you can definitely see it. So, and also starting with a good stand of alfalfa, it will stay alfalfa more percentage stronger with alfalfa longer. So. Okay, so I'll take you through a normal year for us. So in the spring and April, okay, as soon as it firms up and dries up, I like to get some fertilizer on all my fields. So I like to get some sulfur and some boron, some potash on all of them. I split that up at least twice. So one thing that I've switched a few years ago is how I fertilize I'm going to call it my grass. It's mostly grass. I manage it as grass. And that is 3-4 years ago, I went to fertilizing it 4 times a year. So I fertilize it between every cut. So, and I put about 30 to 35 pounds of actual N on per cutting. And also, when I do that, I add some sulfur, and AMS is my sulfur choice. So it just, I don't know the science behind it, but it seems like some sulfur added with the little bit of urea I used, it's almost like turbocharged nitrogen. So, and I am reminded fairly often how good that has worked for me. For instance, this year I ran out about an acre and a half right next to a big tree line fence. So I did not go back into town to get any. So it wasn't too long that driving by at 55 miles an hour, I could tell exactly where it ran out of nitrogen, both in color and the yield. So 2 or 3 years ago when I first started to do it, I drove by a field and it had a wave like this. And I couldn't figure out so-called what the problem was, till I came out with the disc bind to cut it, and sure enough, I had my spread pattern was bad on the fertilizer spreader that I got. So instead of spreading 50 feet, it probably was only spreading like 35. And again, a big difference. It's visual. So I've been very happy with that, and it's worked out well. Some a little bit with quality, you get a little boost in protein too, but it's mainly dry matter yield. So the first cutting, we try to take a first cut fairly early. I'm not the first one to cut, but I'm not too far behind the first one. So what we do is all first crop is cut and wrapped. So I just try to get it cut, get it off, get it wrapped, get it made, and let the sun and rain start on helping out the second crop. So, and to be honest, when I'm cutting first crop, there's definitely some orchard grass heading out. So, but it really hasn't hurt me the last 4 or 5 years. I've been able to still get that 40, 150 to 160 RFQ. So, you know, I can't prove this, but I do trap gophers. We have pocket gophers. So I'm out a lot in the fields, like late March, early, as soon as the gophers are digging. And it just seems like the older grass stands are a little bit more even to wake up in the spring than the newer stands. So I think that helps. All your orchard grass is not at the same maturity when you first cut. So after we get it off, within about 7 days, because orchard grass starts to grow, you know, within like 2 days you can see new growth. We monitor for bugs, so for insects. So, and I will caution you here that if you have mixed stands or grass stands, if you think that alfalfa weevil and potato hopper leaf hoppers are not in your mixed stands, they just go for the alfalfa stands, I can prove you wrong on that. So I thought I would not have the pest problem with the mixed stands, but I do. So mainly, and they can come early. If you cut early, you know, I've had to spray alfalfa weevil by the 7th or 10th of June. So we spray ourselves usually because by that time my egg service is still spraying corn and beans, and they don't want to rinse out and spray my hay. So usually I end up just spraying it myself. But we try very hard to get it sprayed within a day or two. Okay, so then for second, third, and fourth crop, that's where I try to get some of my dry hay. So I try to pick the window that I can for weather-wise, and this year it was really tough. So I do not have much. I have some, but not much baled hay, or less than normal, I should say. So then all my dry hay that I plan for baling, I go over with a rotary tedder. So that has been a big improvement because you can bale sooner, but it's also more even dry throughout the field. So one thing I learned is that the large square bales of hay are very unforgiving of baling any damp hay. So, but I use, to me, there's kind of an art to TED, like when and how and so forth. So I TED a lot of hay between 6 and 8 in the morning and probably 9 and 10 at night. So I have about half throttle PTO and a fairly fast ground speed. So, and I'm still at around that 28, 30-day cutting schedule. So, you know, at 25 days, if there's quite a bit there and we got a gorgeous forecast, I'll go ahead and cut some. I won't cut it all, but I'll cut some. So that being said, at 30 days, if rain is imminent, I will hold off. So, because as a rule, it doesn't work very good, or at least the last few years with all the rain that we've had, a lot of rain on hay, I have a hard time with that. So right or wrong, I will just wait. Wait till that passes and get the next window. So one thing I changed last year is we do not store any more hay outside. So it's either under a roof or it's wrapped. So, and last year at the fourth crop, we had some of the best haying weather we had all year. I got a bunch of dry hay made, and in the past, before I started the baleage, I would tarp it, I would pot it outside, tarp it, and all that stuff, and boy, it's tough. Some of those big thunderstorms come, and they'll pull the plastic off. So what I've done, what we did last year is we wrapped dry hay, and it turns out gorgeous. So, and with all the rain we've had the last couple of years, I think, if we're being real honest with ourselves, I think there's a lot more spoilage to the hay that's stored outside, even if it's net wrapped and all that stuff, than what we'd like to think. And if it's good hay, the price of good hay and all that stuff, wrapping's fairly cheap. So then when I pull, when I hay, I pull samples. I have my own bale probe. I pull the samples right away before either they're wrapped or put away. So I feel I can get a good composite sample. So I know what I have. That's one thing with bales. It's very easy to inventory where they are. I know the quality. So one thing I did after the 2013 and 14 winter is normally I get some hay that will test between 170 and 190 RFQ. So I always want to know where that is. So in the winter, when the polar vortex moves in, I do bump up the grain on my heifer some, but that's when I go get that hay that tests higher. So that's been an improvement for me. I've been able to keep my heifers growing through that, and you know, that's when the highs are like 0 or 5 below, and at night it's 15 to 25 below. So that has helped me keep my heifers on track for the growth that they need. Okay, we'll go through a few pictures now. If you could go back. Okay, so this is some of my contour strips. The darker green that's in the middle, that was seeded down this year. And next spring, that's with that Roundup Ready Harv Extra alfalfa. I got a very good stand this year. I was fortunate. And that orchard grass will go into that field like next spring. So that will be ready to go. And the windrow hay is fourth crop. That's mostly grass, and that was cut here in September, and there was a lot there. So that will be hay at least one more year. But when I have the other opposite strips seeded down, it'll be easy to take these out and put corn. It'll be probably corn, beans, and then I'll go back to hay. So you want to go to the next one, please? Oh, okay, let's go back. Okay, so one thing we do all, for haying, we do all our own cutting and raking and hauling the bales off. I hire all my baling done and all my wrapping done. So this baler is from Brett and Beth Duman. They do an outstanding job for me. Before I cut hay, I send Brett a text. I kind of thinking about when I can bale, and he gets right back to me. He said if it would work or if it wouldn't. So outstanding service, just outstanding. So he can be here. He's there within 20 minutes or half an hour of the time that he says. So Mike? Yes. Yeah. All my hay harvested is with the big square baler. So I will wrap. They're 3x4x5s to fit in the wrapper. They go in the Anderson wrapper. So, and the dry hay, we lengthen those out. So you want to go to the next one, please? Okay, so we'll get. Okay, I hire within a half a day. Okay, so if we bale 5, 6 at night, it's the same thing with, okay, Chris Bergstrom does my wrapping. Chris Bergstrom custom wrapping. He does, again, an outstanding job. I text him before I cut, think if we're going to wrap the hay about, if it would work for him. So he kind of gets a heads up. So I do respect his time. And by that I mean is I want to have all the bales in the yard ready to be wrapped before he drives into the driveway. So when he just sets up, we can get them wrapped and I can get them out. So if we bale 5, 6, 7 at night, we'll get the bales rounded up and he'll be there in the next morning to wrap. So I think there's maybe only one time in 2 years it was maybe close to 24 hours. If he comes around noon and I can get the bales, then he's usually there by dark. So we would have a picture of him, but we wrapped most of the hay this year at night. So, okay. You want to go to the next one, please? Okay. That's just some of our hay fields. That one is classified also as highly erodible. So, not that you need to. My contour strips, they're all classified as highly erodible. But the way they're farmed and the way they're laid out, they are not. Okay, it's just done a fantastic job. Actually, on my contour strips, again, which is classified as highly erodible, I have less erosion on those than some of my ground that's classified as non-highly erodible. Okay, that's just another picture. So he can really eat the hay. That's a new baler for him this year, and works outstandingly well. Okay. Okay, this is kind of how I prefer to wrap hay, in that I like to have it on a little bit of a slope if we can for drainage. And also, we always wrap going uphill. If it's not level, we always wrap uphill. So we wrapped the other way once, and it was just hard to keep the bales. It's not like a bagger where they have a backstop and cables. It's just hard to keep the bales real tight to one another. So, and another thing is when we wrap hay, if we wrap two kinds of hay, all one kind of hay goes in first, and then the other kind of hay goes in second. So that's for inventory purposes. So I always know what's there. So we don't mix and match 2 to 1, 1 to 2, 5 to 4. It's all one kind. Okay. Okay, that's just me cutting hay. We have a modest line of haying equipment, but works very well for us. Yeah, that's a wheel rake. I also have a rotary rake, and it should be reversed. It should be Nancy in the tractor. She rakes most of the hay this year. So, but she's the only one that could run the camera. So that's why I got in. So, and yeah, we just use a couple old wagons. They're hooked their 4-wheeler. I'm going to run them out. And one thing I learned is a wheel rake like that, if you have heavy hay, mean high yield, and it's fairly wet for wrapping, does not do a very good job. So we also bought a rotary rake. So that works better with the heavy wet hay. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, we just load the bales with the skid loader, and usually Nancy drives the tractor and the wagons, and it goes pretty quick to get the bales rounded up. Okay. So what 2020 means is I always try to make some improvements. Okay. So the improvements I try to make improvements. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. So for 2020, we're going to do at least 3 things. So number 1 is I'm going to get my rotable acres that I have the majority of my hay on, we are going to grid sample those. So looking at my soil tests, my other row crop ground is grid sampled. Looking at the soil tests this spring, just with the alfalfa, you can easily, have a pH between 7 and 6.1 in the same field. I think it will be a pretty fast payback to grid sample my hay acres. Also, I haven't done it before, but we are going to start to do some tissue tests once or twice a year, and see how we're doing that way. And also, I'm going to weigh more bales of hay, so I kind of know my yield. Now it's a guess, to be honest with you. So, dry hay is easy to weigh. You can just get that at any time. There's a scale about 5-6 miles from me. I can just run a bale out. I just pick a random bale, run up and weigh it. But baleage is different. Baleage will have to get weighed before I feed it. So, because usually I don't have time to weigh a bale and get it back in time before they get it wrapped. And so I'm just going to weigh some more hay. So I should have some time in the winter. So. And again, I'll just get a better idea kind of on my dry matter yields. So, okay, one thing I've learned a lot from, and I strongly encourage you guys to think about it anyway, is to try some new things, okay, on your forage acres. And by that I mean you don't have to, it's not widespread, do or die. Just take something small that you're curious about or whatever, and try it. Okay, and I'll just give you a quick few examples for me. What I did is this past spring, okay, I have an old grain drill that I see my alfalfa with, probably 20, 30 years past its prime. Okay, but it still works okay. But there's been getting to be more and more alfalfa that's seeded with fertilizer broadcast in our area. So this spring, I seeded down some non-highly erodible land. I thought now's the time to take a chance, I thought. So I bumped up the grass in it a little bit because it's a short stern. I know I always say I plant Roundup Ready alfalfa, but I wanted to try something different. So again, I broadcast the alfalfa, the grass seed, with 250 pounds of fertilizer per acre. And we were fortunate, we got rain right away, and it worked. So, and the reason I put some grass with it, it's going to be a short life stand. So, and I was a little leery about the broadcasting the alfalfa, so I hedged my bets, and I probably it probably was a couple pounds of Italian ryegrass, a pound of orchard grass, maybe a pound of Festolium. So there's a fair amount of grass. So, but I thought just in case it failed, I would have I would have feed there for a year or two. So, but like I say, we seeded it, we got it rolled. It rained within a couple hours after we got done, and I got a very nice stand. So I would probably do that again. So I may not do that to my contour strips just because there's so much field edges. It's just hard on you when you're driving next to a fence line and that alfalfa seed's going out into the ditch. So, but I learned a couple things. So last year, I've read a lot about metafescue grass. So again, I'm very happy with my orchard grass, but I just thought I'd try some. So I bought a bag or two. I seeded some just like I would into the established alfalfa. And then what I had left over, I just seeded a plot until I ran out of pure metafescue grass. And then I purposely stressed it. I think I cut it maybe 3 times or 4 the seeding year, but I purposely cut it, I think like October 15th or 20th, and baled what was there. And we had a tough winter, but it came through very good. So the story is probably not finished yet for me for metafescue. The one thing with forage is sometimes you have to be more patient than with row crops on the outcome. So like corn and beans you plant in the spring and then you usually know by fall what's what. But sometimes with hay, it just takes a little bit longer. So there's a chance down the road that I may add some metafescue to my orchard grass that I put in. So the first year that I could get a bag of Harv Extra, low lignin alfalfa, I bought it. So I seeded it separate, and I pulled the samples on it all the seeding year and all the next year. So it made a believer out of me. It's not perfect, but it gives you a good cushion in case that you get a little extended cutting interval, and if you don't, it gives you the better quality. So the year before that is I cut some hay in September, or mostly alfalfa in September. So I did an informal poll that summer on farmers that cut in September, and they all said, yeah, it's really not been an issue. Like, we just cut when we get time and put it up. So about the 15th or 20th or 25th of September, I just took out my disc bind, went in the back part of the field where nobody could see. I just put my disc bind down and cut 150 feet. Okay, so the hay got dry. I just took my small square baler and baled it off. And I tell you, I never will cut alfalfa in September again. I lost a lot of plants, a lot. I mean, you didn't have to count. You could just drive by, and you could see the difference. So I will cut my grass fields in September, but I will not cut my alfalfa. So it just, just some of the things I tried on a small scale to help learn, and they have helped me kind of which way I go. So with that, it kind of ends my presentation. If you got any questions, please speak up. So hopefully I made it somewhat clear on how and why we do things. Yeah. I'm sorry. I will. I try not to. I'm sorry? Repeat the question. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. The question was, do I cut alfalfa in October? So I will, okay, but there's a couple things. It has to be a fairly young stand, and I have to need the hay pretty bad. So I would rather cut, if I had a so-called cheat, I would cheat the first handful of days of September, maybe where we are, our growing season, full season corn for us is 95 day. Okay, so I will, I'll cut maybe to the 3rd or the 4th of September, but once you get to the 7th and 10th, I would have to need it pretty bad. So new seeding, my direct seeding, I won't have too much trouble cutting that in September. It seems like this past year, with all the winter kill that we had and winter injury at home, the only thing that withstood all that weather was the new seeding. So I will, but I try very hard not to. So, and at home, most of the people, there's some that took a 4th, but their 4th crop was probably about the 5th or the 7th of September, and some just because of the way the late spring and all the rain, some are only going to get three crops. So I have just a little bit of 4th crop left to make. So that's just my personal thing. And like I say, once I did the test strip for cutting in September, that kind of sealed the deal. Any other questions? How late? Boy, anytime in October. Is that okay? So the question was, how late am I willing to cut grass? So I've cut 10th, 15th of October. I think the key thing there is make sure, you don't cut it too short. So, you leave at least 4 or 5 inches, so you don't stress the alfalfa plant or stress the grass that way. So, and then sometimes, usually, if I've had a good season, yield-wise, I will go back out with some potash in the fall. Usually, potash is cheaper in the fall, and this past spring, the majority of fertilizer comes up the Mississippi River, where I am. It comes up to St. Paul, Minnesota. So it comes up on barges. Well, everybody knows what happened. There was no barges that came to St. Paul till July. So urea potash was very expensive. So it's come down some. So, but most of the time, if I take an October cut, I will try to get some fertilizer back out there. I'm not for sure if that's enough time, you know, when we get the rain to help it out any, but I'm trying to build my potash levels up a little bit too, so it doesn't hurt. So, any other questions, Mike? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. The question is are we inoculating the baleage? And yes, I do. So, it just I'm not for sure the product that he has on the baler, but I always tell him, you know, to do the recommended amount. So sometimes the truth of the matter is sometimes our moisture level on the baleage gets fairly low. So sometimes with the grass hay, if you have good drying, it can blow by that 45% fairly soon. Or fairly quick, I should say, by the time I get home and get it raked and we get it baled. So I as of yet, he does a good job wrapping. He uses good quality plastic. He gets a lot of wraps on, and we haven't had any trouble saying wrapping maybe 30% hay. So, and on the other hand, if I plan on dry hay and I start raking and I'm not real comfortable on the moisture, and by that I mean, you know, if I need it at 17 and I feel maybe it's 20, okay, we will go ahead and wrap that hay. So, and that's worked out very well. So it's maybe not perfect, but it's way, way better than a hay fire. So one thing I don't like, real wet baleage, and by that I mean 55%. There's some, but I got to know where that is because we've had a little trouble in the winter. If you get baleage at 50% and it doesn't get above zero for a week, okay, those bales kind of freeze. Not real bad, but I don't process the hay at all. I just put it in the feeder, and you know, I don't expect my heifers to chew on an ice cube. So if it comes to that, I take the twines off, and then I kind of split it up so it's once it gets in there and gets broke up, then they can eat it. But if you just put it in there as a cube, if it's 55%, and it's not that many days of the year that it is like that, but it has happened. So, any other questions? The question was the moisture on my baleage. I'd say most of my baleage is between 25 and 40. So, and I'm not saying I'm going to promote that's the way it should be. It's maybe not baleage then, it's more like maybe sweet hay they call it or something like that. But on the other hand, we haven't had any problem with it either. So, but there's you know, around that 40, if you can get around 40% or low 40s, you know, that is an ideal moisture. So, but like I say, just the reality, when the baler comes, when I can do it and all that stuff. So one thing with the Krone baler, it appears that he can really turn up the compression on that, and that I've fed some baleage out of that baler, but hopefully it will squeeze some of that air out. So, but those bales are more dense compared with the baler that he had before. So I can just tell because I just weighed one, and there was a big difference. So, okay, I would the 3x4x5, the one I weighed this year, and I'd have to look for sure. The moisture, I believe it was probably be around 30% or 35. It weighed 1,250 pounds. Oh, I take that back. That was a dry bale. 1,200, and the one I weighed last year was about 860 pounds. So it made such a difference. I went home, got another bale, and weighed that, and it weighed the same. So that's one of the things I'm going to do in the 2020 is I need to weigh more bales. Okay, just so I get a better handle on my dry matter yield. So, because to be honest, the first crop that I got was terrible yield. It was miserable for yield. So the second crop was much better. To be honest, I thought, well, I would have hoped for a little bit better. But if there's more hay in the bale, that made up for it there too. So, and usually when you feed it, well, if you go through a TMR, then it's fairly easy to weigh. But mine doesn't go through a TMR. So, any other questions? Yes.
That mailer looked like it had the scales on the chute coming out. Is that not true?
It does. It does. Yeah, well, true, but how accurate are yield monitors? Yield monitors are only as good as they're calibrated for. No, it gives me some idea, for sure. So, but I think I kind of asked him what the average weight was, and I think it was like he was probably about 100 pounds off from what the scale said and what the baler said compared with the scale, and it was in the favor of the scale. Okay, so that is true, like I say, but I just don't know how often they calibrate it. I don't know how they do it, and then moisture plays a part in it too. So, any other questions? Well, if not, I thank you all for coming, and I hope you got something from this presentation, and I thank you that the seminars get put on for education because everybody can learn something sometime. So thanks.